Yo, what is up, guys? I am Josh, and this is #LifeChoices.
I am Anath. This is the podcast where we aim to help you make the best life choices.
And I am David, here to welcome you to Situational Saturdays.
Lastly, I am Lemuel, and this is our weekly segment where we talk about different situations we face in life.
Yes, so we take both real and hypothetical situations from you guys, and we ask each other, if you were in this situation, what would you do? So today we have Anath to read to us what our situation of the day is.
So today we're keeping it real and we're talking about a situation that a friend of mine sent. So thank you, Jasmine, for this. So Jasmine says, one of the struggles I have is balancing my life. Personally, I know my priorities, but there are a lot of things that I want to do that's not part of my priority, which results in me not being able to do what I have to do and end up doing the things that I want to do, which isn't always the best thing to do. I think that this is a very relatable topic because in our lives there are things that we want to do and there are things that we have to do, and there's a battle. Is it part of my priorities or is it not? And so I think I'm going to begin this discussion by asking you guys, what is priority to you?
Yeah, but before we define that, thank you for that question, Jasmine. And to those that want to send in their situations, basically maybe they're tackling something and maybe we can talk about it to help you out. You could just send us an email at lifechoicesph@gmail.com. So I repeat, that is lifechoicesph@gmail.com. And maybe, who knows, maybe one of these days your situation will be the topic of our episode, and you can choose. You could just tell us you want to keep it anonymous or you don't mind your name being said on this podcast. So back to what Anath said, what are priorities? And I kind of want to check what is the actual dictionary definition of this. So but while I'm looking it up, maybe you could answer, David. What do you think? What to you is a priority?
Well, I want to address Jasmine's question by telling you how gardening is done, especially when you garden a rose bush.
Very interesting approach out there. So I don't think Jasmine's into gardening.
Well, you can learn from this example that I'm going to give you. So when you garden, especially when you trim a rose bush, you would have to trim, right? You have to take out some of the branches so the really beautiful roses would bud. So when taking that principle into life, or that idea into life, sometimes you have to not do some good stuff so you can do the best stuff.
Better stuff.
Because you can only have 24 hours in a day. You have limited time, you have limited resources, so you have to find out what these best things are.
Yeah, okay, so back to the dictionary, what the dictionary considers to be what the word priority means. And I don't know what dictionary this comes from, but I just Googled priority, and according to Google, it says that it's the fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. So basically, it's saying that priority is the difference between something we consider important and something we consider less important. So
yeah, and I think that when reflecting on Jasmine's situation, I realized that what she had done is separated the things she has to do as priority and the things she wants to do as not priority. But I think when trying to tackle this issue, the first thing we need to address is, what are my priorities, right? And when you're able to define and understand what I really have to do, then you're able to plan it out, like David said. You plan it out, and that allows you to understand what else you can do, which are the things you want to do. Because the reality is this: our lives wouldn't be the most interesting if we just lived it based on what we have to do or what we were obligated to do. We have to do things that we enjoy. And so when we do things that we enjoy, that often becomes the priority. But clearly there's an issue of balancing it out, because as a college student, I know that I have to focus on my academics, that I need to do well in school, but at the same time, I don't particularly enjoy many of my subjects, and I'd rather be doing something else. And so understanding priority, defining it, and knowing that there are things that I have to do, but it's not wrong to do the things I want to do. So let me ask, what are things that you want to do but often cannot because of things you have to do?
I would say I want to travel to different countries, explore the world, but because I have to go to work so that I can have the money to do that, I can't travel. So it's ironic, because the thing preventing me is the thing that will help me get to what I want. But yeah, so I want to travel, but I can't because of all the things that I have to deal with here, especially with it at work.
Personally, it's for me. I guess it should be more of a priority, but I should exercise more. But just the routine, the daily grind of going to work, going home late, kind of takes away the time. I have energy to do that thing which I need. So I just want to share that as well. Oh, one more thing to navigate Jasmine's situation. A really cool analogy came into my mind. Back in college, our professor showed us this video, and it was a seminar on how to prioritize.
Okay.
And one of the things he explained to this class full of MBA graduates, high people with high seniority, leadership levels in different companies, was he took a jar, and in it, he had to put items. And in the items he had to put 3 large rocks, as well as a whole can of puny, tiny rocks and sand. And he would ask the participants, in your life, what would you have to do to put all these things that you have to put in the jar? I mean, you have your important stuff like work, you have your important stuff like family, but you also have to pay attention to things like your stocks, your roses, and I guess your the cleanliness of your home. And those big things represent the big rocks, whereas those smaller details represent the finer grains. And what people would often do when they were asked to put it in the jar was they would put the small things into the jar and then put their big things last. Surprisingly, what happened
won't
was
fit.
the sand would pile up halfway in their jar, and when they had to put the big rocks, 1 or 2 wouldn't be able to fit. And there's something wrong there, right?
Yeah.
Intuitively, we know that we have to put the most important things first. And so the professor emptied the jar. The person conducting the seminar asked them to try it again. This time, put the big rocks in that jar first, and then filter in all the other grains into that jar. Lo and behold, what happened? All those finer pebbles moved aside and basically completely filled that jar. Everything, not a single grain, was left outside the jar. In case the analogy wasn't clear, in our lives it's largely the same. If we put all the small details first, we might not be able to fit in the truly important things that matter to us more. But conversely, if we really set in stone, like what Ignat said, what is important, what is core, and focus on those things, once we fill in the other details, we can be sure that those other details shift around those core cornerstone pieces of our priorities.
Yeah, so it always goes back to we need to know what we consider as a priority. We've already established that priority is something that takes importance above other things. And I want to share something I learned from this book called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and she introduced this concept of a life philosophy, or something that you can call your one thing. So she gave an example of this baseball player. I forgot the name, but basically her example was rooted in the fact that this baseball player considered his life philosophy as, I want to be the best baseball player ever. And because that was his goal and that was his life philosophy, everything he did was always directed towards that. Is it helping me to get to my goal, or is it hindering me from that? So basically, he was faced with, okay, so somebody's inviting me to like chop wood or something like that. Apparently, that's something they used to do at that time. But like somebody was inviting him to do that. But because it's something that could injure his pitching arm, he decided not to do it. So he deemed that that was not a priority because it wasn't helping him towards the goal he wants to achieve. And these goals, these aren't like immediate goals. These aren't things that can happen in the near future. So maybe if you're in college, you don't consider your goal as graduation. You have to think further than that, because in the book, it illustrates different levels of goals. So there's like a low goal, a mid-level goal, a top-level goal, and basically all of those things should lead up to that goal. So the thing that you may consider as a, let's say, a low goal could be that like a means towards what you want to achieve. So these may be things that you don't want, but you know that doing it will help you achieve what you want. So say, for example, what do you consider as your goal? I want to be, say, a successful entrepreneur. Now start evaluating your actions. Me going to school, is that something that helps me or it hinders me? You could think about that different ways. Let's say me going on a night out with my friends instead of maybe selling or focusing on your business. You start assessing, is that something that helps me? Now you may want to do the other thing, but ultimately you want to achieve what your top level goal is. And knowing what that top goal is will be able to help you determine whether something is a priority or not a priority. So it's a highly recommended read. If you guys haven't read it, I know Lamo has read it. I suggested it to him. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and it's a very compelling read. So you guys should check it out.
I want to thank both of you for those examples because they really did open my eyes to how we should be balancing and prioritizing things in our lives. And I want to quickly make a distinction, okay? We talked about the things that we have to do and the things that we want to do. But I also realized that there are things that we simply do. And what I'm thinking right now is stuff like social media and Netflix. The reality is that it takes a lot of our time during the day. I spend, moments where I want to be doing something else, I end up wasting it watching a TV show, for example. Now, right now, what I really want to do is get back to playing the guitar. And now, oftentimes, my excuse has always been, but I'm swamped with academics. How do I find the time to play the guitar? But I do find time to watch a TV show.
Yeah.
And that TV show doesn't help me in any way. It's just, for me, it's how I find rest or relaxation. So really, TV shows, social media, and there may be other things in our lives that we simply do for no specific reason, and that time taken by the things we simply do can often be replaced by the things that we want to do, and as a result will allow us to do what we have to do and what we want to do. I apologize, I said do a lot of times, but I hope you get it.
I want to add to that because there's something I stumbled upon, something Mel Robbins wrote. Basically, she gave this illustration that, hey, if at home, let's say you had a plumbing problem, you couldn't get water. I think that's very relevant over the past few weeks. But let's say you couldn't get any water into your house. You see that as a problem, and suddenly your entire world changes. You take a leave from work to make sure that the plumber fixes it. You do everything. You push aside everything else just so that you can solve that problem. Now, how come when it comes to things like plumbing, or when it comes to things like maybe if you're cramming a paper, everything takes a back seat, and suddenly you have all the time in the world? It's because we don't tend to see those things as high a priority enough. And that is why we should learn to see our problems, or to see the things that we need to solve, or maybe just our goals, like maybe going back to the guitar, as similar to a plumbing problem, wherein you cannot rest until you accomplish that. Because like in a plumbing problem, you don't see somebody saying, okay, you know what, I have a plumbing problem, let me just watch Netflix for a while, let me just chill. Like, nobody does that because there's a sense of urgency. You want to get to it immediately, so you find time. Not only find time, sometimes you make time. Where there was no time, you suddenly are available because you have to deal with something. That's how we should deal with our priorities.
Yeah, and Josh said something very crucial here, is the concept of finding time. Because many times the excuse is we don't have time.
Yeah.
But when there is something that needs urgency, when there's something that is number one on our priority list, we will do it because we find time. And we need to be able to find time for the things we have to do and the things we want to do. And we are able to do what we want to do by first prioritizing the things we have to do.
Yeah, and going back to the illustration of Lemuel, I think just like how it's so important to establish your top priorities, you won't be able to establish those things in your life if you don't prioritize those things. Because sometimes we focus on the small things. Oh, my goal is to lose weight. In connection to that story, losing weight is like sand. It's the smaller goal, when in fact your higher goal should be, let's say, oh, I want to be fit because I want to take care of my family. So that's your bigger rock. You place that in first, and then you can start losing weight because you've established that is important. Now, David, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so I think what Jasmine also needs are practical strategies to handle the day-to-day prioritizing and day-to-day managing, especially your time. So I want to share one thing when it comes to prioritizing. And for the listeners out there, have you heard about the Eisenhower matrix?
Very complicated. I have no idea what that is.
I'm scared already.
Well, it's made by General
Someone named Eisenhower. Yeah, I
General
figured.
Eisenhower. But it's a very basic matrix that has
Is this the
two
thing about
important
urgency
things.
and importance?
It's the
Okay.
thing about
Yeah.
urgency and importancy. I never forget the name Eisenhower because I find it real cool.
Really important.
And when you bring it up in a conversation, you sound so smart. So what it is there's a quadrant. You divide a square into four, and on the top left, it's something important and something urgent. What do you do? And on its right, it's something not important, but it's something urgent. And at the lower left, it's something. Where am I?
So you're the lower left. So that is something
Urgent but not important.
urgent but not important.
It's something urgent but not important. And lastly, it's not important and it's not urgent.
urgent,
So what
yeah.
do you do if something is important and it's urgent? You do it. That's the first thing that you have to do right away. Make sure that you make time to do it. What if it's important but it's not urgent? Then you make time for it. You schedule it sometime. Schedule it for Friday or schedule it on Saturday night.
But make
when
sure
you
to
will
stick
do
to
it.
your schedule.
And make sure you stick
Yeah.
to your schedule. Another thing is, what if it's urgent but it's not important? Now, if you have the power to delegate it, that's what you do. If you're in a leadership position and there's someone you can ask to do this, if it's not important but it's urgent, it has to be done, give it to someone else.
Give it to younger brother. Joke.
That's usually what happens. But if you have no one to tell it to, then you would have to do it right away. And especially if it can be done under 2 minutes, do it right away. And if it's not important and it's not urgent,
Why is it even there?
Discard.
yeah, you have to discard it. Or if you're one of those students that really don't want to lose that idea, just write it down. Put it in a someday to-do list. Someday, when you have the time for it, when you think it becomes important, then at least it's on paper that you can tackle it sometime.
Yeah, I think.
And I just want to add the not important, not urgent. That is often the things that we simply do.
Yeah.
And I believe, Jasmine, and to all our listeners, we need to identify the things that we do which are not important and not urgent. And when we're able to identify that, that is when we can realize that those things need to be discarded. I'm not saying it's wrong to watch a movie or a TV show, but when there are more pressing things we want to do and we're complaining that we don't have the time, this is the first step that can be taken so that you do find the time to do what you have to do and to do what you want to do.
Yeah, going back to Lamo's illustration, those things are the sand. Like, those are the things you have to take out first so you could make room for the bigger things. And then you could start bringing in the little things. So it's always important to prioritize, to rank these things. And I think the Eisenhower matrix is a very good way of finding which is the most important to you. Is it urgent and important? Is it urgent but not important? Is it important but not urgent? And lastly, is it not important and not urgent? Assess all those things that you're doing, and then you'll find out how you can rank these things. And so I want to recap the things that we discussed because it was a very rich discussion to a very common problem that all of us face. And I want to go and start with what Lambo said, wherein there's a jar and you could fit all these things, the big rocks, the small rocks, and the sand, but you have to do it in a particular order. You can't just put the sand in because if you could actually visualize that, if the sand fills up the whole thing, then there's no room for the other things. And that is often what happens in our lives. We try to fit in things the wrong way. Sometimes it's not even that there's so much, it's that it's fit in the wrong way. So we need to find out first, what are our big rocks, what are our small rocks, and what is sand. And that's really connected to the other things we discussed, like the Eisenhower matrix. And just to recap, it's determining 4 things: what is urgent and important. So urgent is something that you have to do now, something that is time bound, something that you have a deadline for. That is urgent. And what is important is something that, oh, it's crucial. If I don't do this, then I'm gonna fail my class. If I don't do this, then something bad is gonna happen. Second is urgent but not important. So it's something that is time sensitive. Say for example, there's a sale and there's a limit to until when you can purchase that product, but the product isn't actually important. So it's urgent but not important. So that way you can determine, is it something I have to do now, or maybe something I don't have to do at all. Next is important but not urgent. Find a schedule for it since it's not time sensitive. And lastly, if it's not important and not urgent, it's like what Einath said. Those are the things that we simply do. And just like with the things we simply do, if we have a plumbing problem, we don't do those things. We prioritize what is urgent and what is important. And I hope these tips have helped you guys. And this is our 3rd episode for our Life Choices podcast. And I just want you guys to know you could subscribe to us on Facebook. Just search Life Choices PH. And there we'll also post recaps of our episode, maybe short descriptions. So if you weren't able to follow with our discussion with what we considered to be good tips for prioritizing, we'll post like a 5-minute video where you can check us out, where we're going to outline these things so it's easier for you to digest. You could also subscribe to us on Instagram. That's at LifeChoicesPH, as well as on Facebook, which is facebook.com/LifeChoices. PH. So I just want to thank our audience for listening to the Life Choices podcast. If you have a situation you want to feature on this show, you can email us at lifechoicesph@gmail.com. And I just want to put like a footnote there. I think in a few weeks we'll be launching our website. I don't know if by this time we have our website already, but we'll also have a tab there for our Situational Saturdays where you can give us what situation you want us to tackle. So just watch out for that. We'll post about it on our social media. So that's Life Choices PH on all social media. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. So we hope to have you guys back here for Monday for Movie Mondays. But before you go, we just want to remind you, in this life, we have no choice but to make choices. So choose wisely. See you in the next podcast.